and it's called Making Democracy Work. This has come into fruition after many, many months. In fact, the first paper that we commissioned in this book is right after the COVID, I think. Right? Why? It's going to be until 5 o'clock. 5 o'clock. We will first invite. It's going to be until 5 o'clock. We will first
voice analysis.
These are also the authors of certain chapters in our web.
First time using it.
So I would like to now invite Mr. Thomas Pan. So I would like to now invite.
This has been a day that we have been looking forward to. Very excited about it. Not just because this is the first book that Bersih is launching, but what we are I'm holding in my hand is really a combination of the work that we have been doing for the last 2.5 years. Yes, so, and this, okay, we are not so bad, but we don't want to be that bad or that situation. So what Bersih did was that we look at some of the weaknesses in our political system and our institution. That not only that there was no barrier to party hopping, but there were actually incentives for politicians, for elected representatives to hop, and usually hop to be with the government. Now I want to call these incentives carrots and sticks. Carrots are the incentives whereby if you are with the government, a lot of some of these elected members hop towards the government simply because they wanted their cases dropped, and we saw some cases withdrawn and dropped, and that is the power of the Attorney General right now. The power to start a charge against somebody, and the power to, while the case is going on, to pull back and drop. We saw of accountability. So this is what this book is about. This book was our effort to address those problems. We commissioned researchers, experts, to look into some of the issues that we are facing by comparing them with other countries, how other countries resolve their problems, and then we make recommendations that are suitable for our country. The Bersih Steering Committee and Secretariat work closely with the authors of these research reports. Altogether, we commissioned about 19 research reports over the year, and in this book, we compiled together 16 of them, but they are not the full report. Thank you. That this allows any government form from functioning in a stable political environment and to be accountable to the rakyat. So the recommendations representing, please read this. And the adults, the 800 over adults that are in the country should also buy a copy, so we can hit a sale of 1,000 copies. And so that's the situation. So we is over there for producing this book in quick time. This book in time is literally hot off the press. This is the first time I'm holding it, I'm looking at it, and so from 10, and you join me in counting down from 10 to 1, and then
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1,
launch! Thank you so much.
lawmakers, elected lawmakers. Second chapter on shadow cabinet. But before I move on, I would just like to perhaps actually do a better job at introducing the book first. So this book actually consists of 16 chapters, as mentioned by Thomas. We cover 4 sections, or rather maybe 4 institutions. So first part of the book, which has 5 chapters, we talk about improving access to voting, as not only for overseas voters, but also for our station voters who might be based. We also have a chapter from Dr. Muhammad Syed Biasan, he's a university lecturer, and Sahana Katibelu. They wrote about parliamentary select committee reforms. So basically how to make our PSC having more teeth to investigate and perhaps enforce some of their reports. We also have a chapter by a team of researchers from Reform, which is an NGO, I believe, led by Iswafi Hadi Kamilan. They are talking about reintroducing the Parliamentary Services Act. So moving on to Fikri, your chapter will be on public appointments and also on GLCs. Maybe we'll start by mapping out the topology of GLCs for the benefits of our audience. What are the potential problems that people have been talking about? And of course, we have been hearing people saying that politicians and elected representatives shouldn't be in GLC board at all.
It can be shunned upon because there's a conflict of interest. It can also open the door to possible, abuse of power, as we've seen in the infamous one case. But on the other hand, there's also an opinion that GLCs, they don't only serve a commercial objective, they also serve a social objective, which requires somebody who is well connected and well versed with matters of government and connecting to the rakyat and so on. So that's the debate that they should or they are permitted to be part of GLCs. So just to represent both sides of the debate. But in Malaysia's case, we have seen that appointments of political members and MPs into government and government-owned enterprises have been abused, especially in these recent, not only during Ismail Sabri, but also during Muhyiddin's and also who's before Mahathir.
Yes, this particular chapter is the shortest chapter that I contributed, and in terms of the time frame also, it was done before the Sheraton move. So it is kind of an odd chapter, and if you look at it, it is called Establishing a National Address Registry with Unique Identifiers, assign the responsibility of looking at the electoral roll, how to clean it up, because at that time we were exposing all the problems that we were having with the electoral roll, and one of the main problems was the absence or incomplete address of voters. There were about 15% at that time of the voters on the electoral roll that did not have an address. So if you don't have an address, how can you be certain that this person should be voting in that constituency? It's a massive problem. And we have a different way, just the J dot whatever, or JLN dot, or spell it in Ku, you can spell it Taman. There is no standardized way how you name it. So what happened is that when somebody becomes registered as a voter in the past or eligible to vote, the election commission workers have to decide where you are staying. So they will look at the address, and in their best guess, they will look at the road and then their best guess locality, and then attach the locality to that voter. So Selangor, but they have to make decision for someone over in Sabah, Sarawak or Johor, places built and approved by the town council is given a unique ID. So that ID is attached as long as the property is still around, it's attached. So this is how that when you register yourself as a person, you are asked what is your address. Your address is 100% clear because it is attached to the property ID. So there is no way now for it's not committee under the Pakatan Harapan government where we were invited to give input to that committee, and I was assigned the responsibility of looking at the electoral roll, how to clean it up, because at that time we were exposing all the problems that we were having with the electoral roll, and one of the main problems was the absence or the incomplete address of voters. There were about 15% at that time of the voters on the electoral roll that did not have an address. So if you don't have an address, how can you be certain that this person should be voting in that constituency? It's a massive problem. And we exposed it before G14, we even took them to court. And the reason given why they didn't have address was in the migration of the data from one computer system to another, they lost it, 15%. And that is, they only have the assigned locality of that. So the problem now still continues. Now we have an election on. And I tell you, one of the most common complaints that we receive in Bersih is this story of we are all 5 in one family, but how come my youngest child is voting in another polling station or even in another constituency, and even we got one complaint in another state? They are all staying in PJ, but one is voting in Batu Pahat in Johor. How did that happen? Now, you may say it's not a big deal. It is a huge deal. Simply because it undermines the integrity of the electoral roll and the election commission. People begin to believe that it is some serious, malicious way to assign voters away.
Okay, so please to come here.
Okay,
Okay. I move out.
I don't know how they know, but I don't think it's possible. But the real reason why this happened really is an administrative error due to the fact that there is no standardized format for our address. You can write your address in different ways. You can spell your jalan in different ways. Just with the J dot whatever or JLN dot or spell it in full. You can spell your taman. There is no standardized way how you name it. So what happened is that when somebody becomes registered as a voter in the past or eligible to vote, the election commission workers have to decide where you are staying. So they will look at the address and in their best guess, they will look at the road and then their best guess locality and then attach the locality to that voter. So sometimes administratively they make mistakes because it's a manual process whereby they are people who are from probably from living in Selangor, but they have to make decision for someone over in Sabah, Sarawak or Johor, places they have no idea what it looks like, what the places are for, and they make that kind of decision, and this is where errors occurs. It is, I believe, not malicious, simply because the number of errors is not big enough to change an election outcome. If we talk about several thousand people in one area be transplanted somewhere else, yes, that is something malicious and something designed to skew an election result. But no, it's an administrative error simply because of our addressing system. So what then we begin to do in my asking question, an expert on this matter from overseas told me, look at the UK. The UK have a system, very simple, without going into the technical part of it. Every single property in the UK has a unique ID or ID number. Just like we have a unique ID and IC, right? There's no two same IC. Every property that has been formed, built and approved by the town council is given a unique ID. So that ID is attached as long as the property is still around, it's attached. So this is how then when you register yourself as a person, you are asked what is your address. Your address is 100% clear because it is attached to the property ID. So there is no way now, or it's not no longer even a human effort to assign the locality. It is all in the machine. If it's in this locality, it is all.
It's incredible. It's an incredible summary, I think, of some of the main research works that Bersih has managed to do over the last 18 months. I hope you can hear me. Maybe we can turn up the volume.
Thank you. I hope that's better.
Okay, so Colin, you asked about the topic of government formation. So what this involves is the process of determining who should be the Prime Minister after an election and how that Prime Minister should be appointed. Now, this idea of government formation, the utilization of what is called the confidence mandate, is a central characteristic of the parliamentary system. Yeah, specifically the parliamentary system, and even more particularly the Westminster parliamentary system. Now, the idea behind this is that the power to make that determination is supposed to be distributed and allocated between two vital political institutions: the head of state and the legislative body. Right now, this is the general principle, and you'll find this principle echoed in most parliamentary democracies. But of course, you have variations within each country. But what is vital to ensure that democracy is stable and to ensure that the rights of the electorate are always respected is that there is an equilibrium between the powers of these two different political institutions, the head of state and parliament. We must maintain an equilibrium. But what's happened in Malaysia? So throughout the course of our political history, and this is the research that I conducted in the fuller version of the report, throughout the course of our political history, what has happened is that we have seen an erosion of Parliament's power, right? So that balance between the head of state's role in government formation and deciding who the PM should be, and the role of the elected members of parliament has completely been unbalanced over time. Now, it's not just at federal level, so we don't just see this at parliament level in deciding who should be the prime minister. We've also seen it at state level, yeah, in various states. Again, across time, yeah. So, what then are the essential issues with this problem, right? So, well, one of the main contributing factors here that has resulted in this is that Parliament was never actually properly empowered, given the powers it needs to make sure its role in deciding which MP has the confidence of the majority, was protected. And how do we do this? How do we empower Parliament? Very simple. Having the right procedures in place. Right? The most important procedure here, of course, would be the vote of confidence. Right? So what we've seen over the course of time is that the Day One Rakyat doesn't have even simple procedures like this in place, and even more so protected. Yeah, protected against executive interference. And again, at state level, at dome levels as well, we see the same problem. That process of determining, deciding who has confidence is not protected in the rules. That's number one. The second issue, of course, is, well, let's look at what we do have, right? So, really, what is wrong with our current system? Is it such a big deal that the power to decide who the Prime Minister is actually rests in large part with the head of state, the young Ridwan Abu? Is that such a problem for us? Well, most of the time, it doesn't really create a problem when you have a clear majority party or majority coalition that wins after an election. And that coalition has a very clear leader who everyone backs. But the difficulty is when it is not so clear. And that is what we're witnessing now currently, right? That's what's happened to our politics. So what then is the problem? The problem is a lack of transparency and accountability. Because the decisions that the head of state makes, how the head of state makes those decisions, the process that he uses, it's not transparent. We don't know. There are no laws that tell us how the head of state must make these decisions. There's no accountability. It is not actually revealed how those decisions are actually made. Right? So that's the problem. Now, had this happened in Parliament, if we decided who has the majority confidence of MPs in Parliament, we will all know. It is very clear, very transparent. That's the main difference. Yeah? So, what then can we do? What then can we do to solve this problem? Now, I've made a number of recommendations in my report. The clearest and most obvious one is, let's just put it down in writing. The process of determining confidence. This involves amending the standing laws, right, of the Dewan Rakyat to make sure that there's a process there which clearly says an MP can move a motion of confidence or a motion of no confidence against the Prime Minister, right? We can put conditions in place to make sure that that process is not abused, right? We can say that it's not enough for just one MP to move a motion. Maybe that one MP needs X number of MPs to support the motion before it can be moved, right? This is to ensure that there's stability, so that we don't have to face votes of no confidence in Parliament on a daily basis, right? So it's amending the rules, and we can put other conditions in place which we can discuss if you're keen to understand more. But apart from that, we also need to make sure that the current ways in which the head of state's power and Parliament's power are defined and decided is clarified. Because of all that's happened in our past. And unfortunately, because of some of the judicial decisions, right, certain clauses of the Constitution have been construed in a way which says that the head of state has vast powers on this area, right? Now, it's important, I think, that those powers be defined. So perhaps what we also need to do is make some limited amendments to the federal Constitution, right? Now, that's two aspects. Three other key points in terms of how we can resolve this issue. One of the main concerns with the issue of choosing a PM is that once you've chosen a Prime Minister, right? Once we've chosen a Prime Minister, she actually has a lot of power to almost pull Parliament hostage. How? Because in our system, we have accepted that the Prime Minister has a lot of power, or I would say a right, to request a dissolution of Parliament. So in certain cases, a Prime Minister who perhaps no longer has the support of the majority of MPs, in a sense can hold the whole system hostage by threatening a dissolution of Parliament. And perhaps we're not ready for another election, right? So how do you solve that? You solve that by putting conditions on when the Prime Minister can request a dissolution of Parliament, right? How do you put those conditions? Through law. Now, there are other countries in which this happens. The UK had laws such as these, and they're called the fixed term parliament laws, and other countries have similar laws as well. Now, what this involves is simply then making sure that before the Prime Minister can ask for a dissolution of Parliament, she must go back to Parliament. The Dewan Rakyat must say okay. Essentially that, right? Now, yes, and so just two other measures. Now, these two measures that I've spoken about, a confidence mechanism as well as fixed-term parliament laws, they can't act on their own. Another key component of this is anti-party voting laws, right? They need to work hand in hand. We need to ensure that the ability of MPs to simply hop parties after an election, for all the reasons that Thomas highlighted earlier, we need to ensure that that is limited, that there are restrictions. And in addition to that, we should also have very clear political funding laws, political financing laws in place. Now, finally, there's one more thing I would recommend. Everything that I've suggested is to, all the recommendations that I've spoken about, simply to ensure that the system is stable. But that is not enough. We need to do more. We are 60 years and more of independence, and still we are not yet a full-fledged, functioning democracy. One of the key things that we need to address moving forward is attitudes and behaviors of our politicians and our public servants. We need to build a mindset of democracy, a democratic mindset. And to me, one of the key ways in which we do this is to introduce codes of conduct, codes of behavior, very clear rules and guidelines that bind all parties about how to conduct themselves before an election, during an election, after an election, and how to manage transitions of power. I think one thing that we can see from the experience of the last 5 years and into the next GE is that this is going to be really important moving forward, especially because it looks like we're moving into a multi-party political system. Okay, I hope I didn't take too much time.
We have one chapter by Serene, she talks about safeguarding the judicial independence. As you know, when judges make decisions on cases involving politicians, of course the result will inevitably be political. But how do you make sure that the public confidence, trust in that process is still there despite the outcome as well? Okay, moving on to Fikri. Your chapter will be on public appointments and also on GLCs. Maybe you can start by mapping out the topology of GLCs for the benefit of our audience. What are the potential problems that people have been talking about? And of course, we have been hearing people saying that politicians and elected representatives shouldn't be in GLC board at all. Is that viable, or what are the other proposal solutions that we can look for in the coming years?
Whenever I get into any conversation with GLCs, I always want to start by highlighting that the definition, there's a specific definition for GLCs, which the media usually and the public usually don't really take into consideration. We lump everything as GLCs. But actually there is a definition, a self-defined definition by MOF. It's GLCs are companies, commercial purpose companies, meaning for profit, which are controlled by the government through investment agencies or investment companies, popularly referred to as GNICs, government linked investment companies. So then the question becomes, who are the GNICs? Right now there are 7: Kazana, PNB, EPF, GOR, LTAT, and actually that was 2016's definition. In the latest Meridian's government's definition, they removed MOFP and replace it with Plan 1. But the point is that GLICs are a group of government bodies which functions as investment holding companies, and companies owned or controlled by the GLCs. So that means when we talk about GLCs, we technically do not include statutory bodies, we do not include FELCA, we do not include MARA, Petronas 50-50. So GLCs technically would be more accurately referred to Sandana, Maybank, your popular listed companies, and the ones that are for profit. So then the not-for-profit companies such as Prasarana, then they shouldn't be included. So having said that, I understand that we cannot escape from discussing those companies as well, which if you don't call them GLCs, we can call them state-owned enterprises. That's a more universal and general term. So then the next question is, should politically affiliated individuals be appointed as directors or as agents in these companies, right?
I think that's a debate, to be fair. From a governance point of view, it can be shunned on because there's a conflict of interest. It can also open the door to possible, abuse of power, as we've seen in the infamous 1MDB case. But on the other hand, there's also an opinion that GLCs, they don't only serve a commercial objective, they also serve a social objective, which requires somebody who is well connected and well versed with matters of government and connecting to the rakyat and so on. So there's a debate that they should or they are permitted to be part of GLCs. So just to represent both sides of the debate. But in Malaysia's case, we have seen that appointments of political members and MPs into government and government-owned enterprises have been abused, especially in these recent, not only during Ismail Sabri, but also during Meridians, and also who's before Meridian, Mahathir.
Sorry, the last three prime ministers, the last three administrations. Hello? Hello? Okay. The last three. Testing. The last three administrations alone, we've seen a lot of appointments being done solely for the purpose of holding on to power. So this requires this to come back. In Malaysia's case, many countries, they don't require such a law to control the appointment of people into GLCs because they don't experience abuses such as what we've experienced. But since in our case, there's a lot of, in the last three administrations alone, we've seen a lot of abuses in this aspect. So we need some intervention. Hence the discussion about there's several types of intervention that we can propose. One is clearly having a GLC Act, which is in existence in South Korea. There's an act that prohibits MPs from sitting in the boardroom of state-owned enterprises. And also in India, they have this supplemented by constitution. So you can do it like a legal channel. Personally, I think the best way is to ensure the transparency is that the it can be not effective to prevent politicians to be appointed, but still not have transparency because things can be abused by the use of proxies, for example. So I think personally, I would propose for greater transparency. That has to be prioritized. Which an example I love would be South Korea also, where they have a website which lists all details concerning state-owned enterprises. So the name of directors, the remuneration rates, and so on. So I think, I think any reform regarding appointment of justice must prioritize transparency, right?
I love that you touched about GLC Act. So we're pushing for recommending a GLC Act to govern GLC appointments and so on. And also to make it more transparent, like I mentioned in South Korea, they have websites detailing all politician appointees or whatnot for GLCs and also their salary, right? So that would be one way of public accountability. The public can check on it instead of it's been hidden and only a few interested nerds would actually dig up all the website in the archive and actually find out. So why not you have open, transparent, freedom of information, transparency. I also love that in the book you talk about the point that you mentioned, which is it could be tricky if you not ban terms or politician from GLC. Then what happens if an existing GLC director or whatnot, he's actually a party member of somebody, for example, right? And that raises the question of, okay, then do you prevent them from calling participation? And one recommendation from the book is prohibit appointment of elected representatives in GLC boards, which I find is a good compromise and perhaps a smart way to legislate things. Because firstly, if you're already unknown or MP, you already have full-time job in there. GLC board, even more work, questionable whether there will be conflict of interest in the decision that you make, which may impact the GLC of which you are the board, and also obviously to prevent the Prime Minister from distributing GLC board of director position as goodies or carrots to ensure majority support. So I think that's a smart way of legislating. You don't ban completely all politicians from GLC one, but elected representative, you don't. So that's one recommendation in the book. And the mechanism, how the way you do it, if you were interested to know further, you can look up the book, buy the book for 55 ringgit outside, and maybe get Thomas to sign on the book this year.